everyone. Ready for another deep dive into the course?
Absolutely. Today we're exploring Lesson 70.
Yeah, this one really digs into some powerful concepts. It can be pretty dense, so we'll unpack it and look for those everyday applications.
Lesson 70. My salvation comes from me. All temptation is nothing more than some form of the basic temptation not to believe the idea for today. Salvation seems to come from anywhere except from you. 2 does the source of guilt. You see neither guilt nor salvation as in your own mind and nowhere else. You have realized that all guilt is solely an invention of your mind. You will also realize that guilt and salvation must be together in the same place. In understanding this, you are saved. The seeming cost of accepting today's idea is this. It means that nothing outside yourself can save you. Nothing outside yourself can give you peace. But it also means that nothing outside yourself can hurt you or disturb your peace or upset you in any way. This idea places you in charge of the universe, where you belong because of who you are. Not a role which can be partially accepted, and you must surely begin to see that accepting it is salvation. It may not, however, be clear to you why the recognition that guilt is in your own mind entails the realization that salvation is there as well. God would not have put the remedy for sickness where it cannot help. That is the way your mind has worked, but hardly his. He wants you to be healed, so he has kept the source of healing where the need for healing lies. You have tried to do just the opposite, making every attempt, however distorted and fantastic it might be, to separate healing from the sickness for which it was intended, and thus to keep the sickness. Your purpose was to ensure that healing did not occur. God's purpose was to ensure that it did. Today we will practice realizing that God's will and ours are really the same in this. He wants us to be healed, and we do not really want to be sick because it makes us unhappy. Therefore, in accepting the idea for today, we are in agreement with God. He does not want us to be sick, neither do we. He wants us to be healed, so do we. The lesson moves into the practice periods. We are ready for 2 longer practice periods today, each of which should last some 10 to 15 minutes. We will, however, still let you decide when to undertake them. We will follow this practice for a number of lessons, and it would again be well to decide in advance when would be a good time to lay aside for each of them and adhere to your own decision as closely as possible. Begin these practice periods by repeating the idea for today and adding a statement signifying your recognition that salvation comes from nothing outside of you. You might put it this way: my salvation comes from me. It cannot come from anywhere else.
Okay, that's pretty straightforward.
Yeah. Then devote a few minutes with your eyes closed to reviewing some of the external places where you have looked for it in the past, in other people, in possessions, in various situations and events, and in self-concepts which you sought to make real. Recognize that it was not there. Tell yourself, my salvation cannot come from any of these things. My salvation comes from me and only from me. Now we will try again to reach the light in you, which is where your salvation is. You cannot find it in the clouds that surround the light, and it is in them you have been looking for it. It is not there. It is past the clouds and in the light beyond. Remember that you will have to go through the clouds before you can reach the light. But remember also that you never found anything in the cloud patterns you imagined that endured or that you wanted. Since all illusions of salvation have failed you, surely you do not want to remain in the clouds looking vainly for idols there, when you could so easily walk on into the light of real salvation. Try to pass the clouds by whatever means appeals to you. If it helps you, think of me holding your hand and leading you, and I assure you this will be no idle fantasy. And then it moves into the shorter practice periods. For the short and frequent practice periods today, remind yourself that your salvation comes from you, and nothing but your own thoughts can hamper your progress. You are free from all external interference. You are in charge of your salvation. You are in charge of the salvation of the world. My salvation comes from me. Nothing outside of me can hold me back. Within me is the world's salvation and my own.
Lesson 70 is basically saying that the key to our happiness, our salvation, our peace, it all comes from within.
It is. It's a radical shift in perspective, but it's also incredibly empowering.
What do you think are some of the nuances in this lesson that we might not pick up on at first glance?
Well, for one thing, it's not saying that we should isolate ourselves or ignore the world around us. It's about recognizing that our true source of peace and happiness is within, not dependent on external circumstances.
Right. It's like we can be engaged in the world without being attached to the outcomes.
Exactly. And it's also important to understand that this idea of internal responsibility doesn't equate to self-blame.
That's a really important distinction. Can you elaborate on that a bit?
Sure. Internal responsibility is about recognizing that our thoughts and beliefs have a profound impact on our experiences. It's not about blaming ourselves for past choices or current difficulties, but about empowering ourselves to choose thoughts and beliefs that align with peace, healing, and joy.
So it's about taking ownership of our inner world and recognizing that we have the power to shape our reality. It makes sense that this idea of finding salvation within might be met with some resistance. Why do you think we're so tempted to look outside of ourselves for that sense of fulfillment?
Well, I think conditioning plays a big role. We've been taught to seek happiness in external things: achievements, possessions, relationships, approval from others.
It's like we've been programmed to believe that happiness is something we need to acquire rather than something that's already present within us.
Right. And letting go of those external dependencies can feel scary. It requires a level of trust in ourselves and in a power greater than ourselves that many of us haven't yet cultivated.
It's like stepping out of our comfort zone and into the unknown.
Exactly.
The lesson also equates guilt and salvation as two sides of the same coin, both originating within our minds. What are some of the practical implications of understanding that connection?
Well, when we see guilt as a self-created illusion rather than an objective reality, it unlocks the door to liberation. We realize we have the power to forgive ourselves, to release the burden of past mistakes.
That's huge. It's like we're giving ourselves permission to let go of the past and step into a new way of being.
And as we release that guilt, we naturally open ourselves to the experience of salvation, which is essentially a state of inner peace and wholeness. The lesson uses this powerful image of clouds obscuring the light within us. What do you think those clouds represent, and what does it mean to go through them to reach that light?
To me, the clouds represent all the stuff that gets in the way of experiencing our true nature. The fears, the doubts, the limiting beliefs. And going through them means facing those obstacles head on.
I agree. It's about acknowledging those challenging thoughts and feelings without judgment and choosing to shift our focus to the light that lies beyond them.
It sounds like a process of inner transformation.
It is. It's about shedding those layers of conditioning that keep us stuck in patterns of suffering.
We've covered the basics of Lesson 70, but let's try to make this a little more concrete, a little more relatable. I think it would be helpful to have a concrete example to illustrate how this all plays out in real life. So let's say you're walking alone in a park on a beautiful day. The sun is shining, the birds are singing, but then as you walk deeper into the park, the past gets a little more secluded, and maybe some thoughts start creeping in. What if someone's following me? Or what if it starts raining and I don't have an umbrella? Suddenly, that peaceful walk feels a little less peaceful. How can we apply the principles of Lesson 70 to this scenario?
That's a great example, and I think it illustrates how easily we can allow our thoughts to dictate our experience. So in that moment, when those fears start to creep in, the first step is to simply acknowledge them, to say to ourselves, okay, I'm feeling a little anxious right now. I'm having some thoughts about my safety, about the weather, just noticing those thoughts without judgment.
So it's not about suppressing those thoughts or pretending they're not there.
No, it's about creating space for them, allowing them to be there without letting them control us.
Okay, and then what? What's the next step?
Well, then we can remind ourselves of the lesson's central message. My salvation comes from me. It's not about denying the reality of the situation or pretending we're not afraid. It's about shifting our focus from those external circumstances to the inner resources that are always available to us. And in that moment, when we're feeling anxious, we can ask ourselves, what would make me feel more grounded and centered right now? It might be taking some deep breaths, focusing on the beauty of our surroundings, or simply repeating an affirmation that resonates with us. Something like, I am safe and protected, or I am surrounded by love.
So it's about choosing thoughts that align with peace rather than fear.
Exactly. And if those fears keep coming up, we can use this as an opportunity to examine the clouds that might be obscuring our inner light. Are we carrying around any beliefs about not being safe or worthy of protection? And once we identify those beliefs, we can begin to challenge and release them.
This is where the practice of forgiveness comes in, both for ourselves and for others who might have contributed to those limiting beliefs.
Yes. Forgiveness is an essential part of the course, and it's deeply intertwined with the idea of salvation coming from within. When we forgive, we release the grip of resentment and anger, freeing up energy to experience peace and joy.
It's like we're clearing out the clutter in our minds, making space for something new to emerge.
Exactly.
Lesson 70 places us in charge of the universe, which can feel like a daunting concept. How do we reconcile that statement with the reality that we can't actually control external events?
It's not about controlling events. It's about understanding that our thoughts and beliefs create our experience of the world. So in a sense, by choosing our thoughts, we are choosing our reality.
So it's about recognizing that we're powerful creators, shaping our world with every thought we choose.
Right. And it's not about being egotistical or thinking we're better than anyone else. It's about recognizing the power we each have to contribute to a more peaceful and loving world.
That's a beautiful concept.
Yeah.
And it brings us back to that idea that God's will and ours are really the same in desiring healing and peace.
Yes. And when we recognize that alignment, we tap into an inexhaustible source of strength and guidance. We're no longer struggling alone, trying to force outcomes or control everything. We can surrender to a higher power, trusting that we are supported every step of the way.
And in that surrender, we find true freedom.
Exactly. It's not about giving up or becoming passive. It's about aligning ourselves with a power greater than ourselves and allowing that power to work through us.
That makes sense. So let's talk a little bit about the ego. The lesson mentions that the ego resists the idea of salvation coming from within because it thrives on the illusion of separation and vulnerability. How can we recognize the ego's influence and choose to align with a more empowering perspective?
The ego's voice often sounds like judgment, criticism, fear, and scarcity. You know, those thoughts that tell us we're not good enough, not worthy enough, not deserving of love.
The voices can be so loud sometimes. It's like they're constantly trying to convince us that we're not okay as we are.
Right. And so the key is to learn to recognize those thoughts as just thoughts, not truths. To remember that we have the power to choose which thoughts we give energy to.
So it's about developing that awareness, that ability to step back and observe our thoughts without getting caught up in them.
Exactly. And then we can consciously choose to focus on thoughts that align with peace, love, and joy. It's not about denying those negative thoughts or pretending they're not there. It's about acknowledging them, allowing them to be there without giving them power over us.
It sounds like a practice of mindfulness, of bringing our attention to the present moment and choosing thoughts that serve us.
Right. And it's a practice, which means it takes time and effort. But the more we do it, the easier it becomes.
Lesson 70 also says that God would not have put the remedy for sickness where it cannot help, which is a powerful reminder that the power to heal resides within us.
Yes. It's not about relying on external circumstances or other people to find wholeness. It's about tapping into our own innate capacity for self-healing.
So it's about recognizing that we already have everything we need within us to experience healing and wholeness.
And that capacity is available to each of us no matter what we've been through or what challenges we're facing.
I'm curious to hear your thoughts on how this understanding of finding salvation within can impact our relationships with others and our approach to the challenges that life inevitably throws our way. So much of our lives revolves around relationships. It's natural to seek connection, to want to share our lives with others. But how does this idea of my salvation comes from me impact our relationships? It seems almost counterintuitive.
It is a bit of a paradox, but I think the key is recognizing that when we believe our happiness depends on others, we set ourselves up for disappointment. We become needy and demanding.
We're always looking to them to fill some kind of void within us.
Right. And so the lesson is inviting us to cultivate that sense of wholeness within ourselves. And when we do that, it changes the whole dynamic of our relationships.
Because we're no longer looking to them to complete us or to make us happy.
Exactly. We can approach relationships from a place of love and generosity rather than neediness.
That's a beautiful concept. It's like we're free to love them for who they are without any expectations or demands.
Yes. And it allows us to appreciate the unique gifts they bring to our lives without trying to change them or control them.
So it's about taking responsibility for our own happiness and then allowing others to be responsible for theirs.
Exactly. And it doesn't mean we can't share our joys and sorrows with loved ones. It's about recognizing that our fundamental sense of peace and well-being comes from within.
This lesson also places us in charge of the salvation of the world, which feels like a huge responsibility. How do we even begin to wrap our heads around that concept?
I know it sounds pretty overwhelming, right? But I think the key is remembering that the world is a reflection of our collective consciousness.
So if we want to see more peace and love in the world, we have to start by cultivating those qualities within ourselves.
Exactly. It's like Gandhi said, be the change you want to see in the world.
I love that quote. It's so simple, yet so profound.
It is. And it's not about grand gestures or trying to save everyone. It's about focusing on our own thoughts, beliefs, and actions. It's about those small, everyday choices we make. To choose forgiveness over resentment, compassion over judgment, generosity over scarcity. Every time we make those choices, we contribute to a shift in the collective consciousness.
It's a reminder that we're not just victims of circumstance, that we have agency, that we can actively participate in creating the kind of world we want to live in.
Yes.
Life is full of ups and downs. How does this lesson help us navigate those difficult times when it feels like our peace is threatened?
Well, I think the key is remembering that challenges are inevitable, but our perception of those challenges is what determines our experience.
So it's about how we choose to respond to those challenges.
Exactly. And when we're faced with a difficult situation, we can ask ourselves, what is this situation teaching me? How can I use this experience to grow and learn?
Instead of resisting it, we can lean into it.
Right. And that perspective can be incredibly empowering because it allows us to find meaning and purpose even in the midst of suffering. It allows us to see challenges as opportunities for transformation rather than as roadblocks.
And Lesson 70 reminds us that nothing outside yourself can hurt you or disturb your peace or upset you in any way, which seems hard to believe when we're in the midst of a difficult situation. How do we access that unshakable peace when it feels like our world is falling apart?
The lesson isn't saying that we won't experience difficult emotions or that challenging things won't happen. It's pointing to the truth that our peace resides at a deeper level beyond the fluctuations of external circumstances.
So it's like our peace is always there, even if it's temporarily obscured by the storm clouds of our thoughts and emotions.
Exactly. And so when we feel our peace being threatened, we can turn inward and reconnect with that inner stillness. We can remind ourselves that our true identity is love and that love is indestructible.
We're reclaiming our power, recognizing that we're not victims of circumstance, that we always have a choice.
Exactly.
This has been such a rich and inspiring conversation. Thank you for sharing your wisdom and insights with us.
My pleasure.
As we wrap up this deep dive into Lesson 70, what final thoughts would you like to leave our listeners with?
Just remember, my salvation comes from me. And this isn't a selfish concept. It's not about isolating ourselves from others. It's an invitation to reclaim your power, to step into your wholeness, and to become a beacon of love and peace in the world. Trust the wisdom within you and allow it to guide you.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into Lesson 70. We hope you found it insightful and inspiring. Until next time, may you find peace within and extend that peace to the world around you.